In length. Florida Republican Matt Gaetz was in that hearing room. Sir, good morning to you. What did you learn from James Comey?
I learned that Jim Comey's amnesia is very selective on any facts that are unfavorable to President Trump. He remembers them with great particularity. But when you try to create four corners around who knows about the communications, who came into possession of documents, then Comey becomes hazier and hazier on the actual details. And I think it really speaks to what will happen going forward in a Democratic Congress. As we get farther and farther away from the events that happened, I do think with all the witnesses, you could see memories start to fade and become inconsistent. But the leaking of Comey, the lying about it to Congress, the inconsistencies with the person that came after him, Andrew McCabe, certainly raises a lot of questions about how the FBI was operating during Comey's leadership.
So he was not forthcoming. That's what you're saying in your answer right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, it is conceivable that he may have forgotten things, but it is really ironic, or it's bizarre to think how cleverly he's able to have those lapses in memory so as to kind of block the oversight that we would like to do.
So, pointed question, was he hiding something, or was he just holding back, or something else?
I think that he did not want to give us the tools to be able to determine his inconsistencies. There's a specific event that I think ripens that. Yeah, so he has his conversation with the president allegedly about Michael Flynn. He then memorializes that in a memo and goes back and talks about it with the senior leadership at the FBI. Now, he claims to remember with great detail what the president said, but when we asked, well, how did people at the FBI react? How did the general counsel react? How did your deputy director react? He was unable to give any details as to the viewpoints they offered. And the reason that's important is that he never told Jeff Sessions, the attorney general. Sessions had not recused himself at this point, and so we see themes with Comey that were reinforced by the inspector general, that Comey viewed the job of the FBI director as something very different than its call. He thought that it was appropriate to try to become a political hack, to influence the media, to create these leaks and this perception around their activity. And really, we want an FBI that investigates the facts and then provides information to the Department of Justice. We don't want it to be an epicenter of political activity. And now Comey's absolutely on the trail. You saw him just yesterday, Bill. I think he'll be very involved in the re-election campaign in 2020. It's one of the reasons I think President Trump needs to pick Mark Meadows to be his chief of staff, because Mark fully understands the facts and the timeline and will make sure the White House is prepared to go toe-to-toe with a far more politically engaged James Comey.
Do you think Mark Meadows will get that job, by the way, while I've got you on that?
I do. I think that the president and Mark Meadows have a good relationship. Mark spends a lot of time over at the White House already, so I think it would be pretty seamless. And it would be a really big mistake to bring someone in as chief of staff who's a good manager, but who hasn't lived the timeline and the facts and the details the way Meadows has. He'll be able to deploy countermeasures to protect the institution of the presidency against what I believe is a very illegitimate attack from the left and from elements of the FBI and Department of Justice.
Let's see where that chief of staff thing goes. Two more specific questions. Trey Gowdy's office released this over the weekend. Mr. Comey answered, I don't remember, 71 times, says Gowdy. Mr. Comey stated, I don't know, 166 times, and answered, I don't recall, 8 times. Did that strike you as excessive?
It was a bit, and I could sense Gowdy's frustration as he was engaged in that interview. And what we've got to do now is we've got to take this transcript and we've got to bounce it against other statements Comey's made to the Intelligence Committee, because I think there may be some inconsistencies in the treatment of Michael Flynn specifically. Comey, I think, took great lengths to say that as Flynn was talking to the FBI, there was no indication that he was lying, and yet that's what's created the leverage against Flynn that's resulted in cooperation.
If you were to go to 35,000 feet and take the view of the Republicans, you think he handled the Hillary Clinton email matter entirely different from they handled the Russia matter as it relates to Donald Trump and his presidential campaign in 2016.
Yeah, very clearly a double standard.
Do you believe he fairly assessed the reasoning for that during that 7 hours?
No, I think that the Democrats were giving Comey a 7-hour cat bath. The far more instructive document came from the Inspector General, who is a Democrat, who was appointed by Obama, and the Inspector General said very clearly that Jim Comey did not follow the protocols and procedures of the FBI. That resulted in people who had a strong pro-Hillary Clinton, anti-Donald Trump bias making the dispositive decisions, not just on the Hillary Clinton investigation, but they then migrated over to the Donald Trump investigation. And again, at that 35,000 foot level, remember, Comey said even when he was fired, no evidence of collusion. That squares with what Lisa Page told us, that 10 months in, there was no there. I mean, here we are, still no evidence of collusion. Comey said it, Page said it.
He is back in about a week's time. We'll see what happens then. Matt Gaetz, thank you for your time, sir, in Washington.